Cornish Mutual, farming insurance experts.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Farming Focus, the podcast for Southwest farmers brought to you by Cornish Mutual. I'm your host, Peter Green, and today we're talking about the Farm Profitability Review, which was authored by Minette and released on the 18th of December last year. With 57 recommendations, there is a lot of material in this report, but the proof will surely be in how it's implemented. We saw a nod to a couple of the recommendations in Emma Reynolds, the Secretary of State for the Environment's Oxford Farming Conference speech, but others may require more fundamental work. To discuss this report, I'm joined by Jack Pearce, an agribusiness consultant with Terrafarmer, and beef farmer Wendy Nicholas, who was named last year's farming champion at the Cornwall Farm Business Awards. I'm delighted to have you both on the show. Jack, I'll come to you first. Welcome to the show. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, please?
Hello, Peter. Thank you for having me. My name's Jack. I'm an agribusiness consultant and also head of commercial for Terrafarmer, which is a UK-based farm consultancy business that focuses on building environmental production and economic resilience on farms. I studied at Harper University before working on a range of farms across England, Scotland, before moving to one of the UK's largest rural consulting firm. And then I moved to Terrafarmer just over a year and a half ago.
Fantastic. That's great. Wendy, welcome. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, thanks very much. It's a pleasure to be here with you both. I farm with my husband, son and daughter-in-law down in Sennon, so just right down at Land's End. We're fifth generation farmers and currently with a beef sattler herd and a small flock of sheep, which my son and his wife run. And we farm about 500 acres. Previously, we were dairy farmers and grew potatoes for Walker's Crisps. We also run a fourth generation campsite that opened over 80 years ago. And I've recently was very privileged to join Farm Cornwall, which is a small Cornish charity that does so much for the whole industry, supporting farmers across the county.
Well, that's a lot to go at there, and really interesting to hear all the different things you've got going on. So, Jack, to the topic in hand, why is the Farm Profitability Review such an important document, and why should farmers and the wider industry really be paying attention to it?
It's a great question, Peter, and what a present to have before Christmas to get our teeth stuck into. So I suppose for me, it's probably the clearest and most comprehensive statement and review in years that shows the current farming model is not economically sustainable in its current state. I think Baroness even says within the first few pages in bold, there is no silver bullet to achieve farming profitability. And I think that is a great summary for me, that actually the review, the 155-page review, is about the analysis of the farm to fork supply chain, and it covers a range of issues in immense detail. I suppose in terms of importance of the document, I feel like it is a very high-level analysis, but now it's time for action. Of course, we've seen some movement across or over the last couple of weeks, but I suppose that the key 3 points for me is it, in black and white, outlines that the current model is not profitable. I think it says 30% of farms were loss-making in 2024, and it shows that a lot of farms lose money on the agricultural production element, but rely very heavily on support payments. Secondly, I think it really helps set the direction of future policy, funding and regulation, with the likes of the 25-year farming roadmap due to come out later this year. And finally, and I think most importantly for me, it reframes that farming is a critical national infrastructure, not a marginal sector. 0.6% of GDP, that narrative shows that actually farming isn't a huge proportion, but it actually underpins a great deal of the agri supply chain, worth plus or northwards of 150 billion, creates, I think, 2.4 million jobs, and then also bolsters national food security and public health. So a huge amount of work in there, but hopefully it's the start of something relatively special in terms of action.
Jack, that's so helpful. You've really laid out so clearly what the report started from, where it comes from, and what Baroness Batters was looking at in the first instance. You talk about the silver bullet situation, and And for me, Baroness Batter's forward was actually really helpful. She talks there about how when we left the EU without a plan for agriculture, the government had three choices. The farming budget could either be used to regulate the environment, and we could import more food produced at lower standards with fewer farmers. The government, secondly, could allow farmers to become more globally competitive and farm unsubsidized, but on a level playing field with the rest of the world. And reading between the lines there, I think we're looking at less regulation and potentially lower standards. Or the third option, as Baroness Batters puts it, is to find middle ground by developing a strategy to start the 25-year farming roadmap, which you alluded to drive more profitable farming in a way that also delivers the government priorities, benefits taxpayers and consumers. And I think we can probably infer from Baroness Batter's tone there that she maybe favours that third option. So that's the situation that we're looking at here with the start of this review and what Baroness Batters was trying to do. Wendy, what would you say for you the headlines were?
So for the headlines, I mean, exactly right as Jack said, the reasons why it was important. And I think we can't underestimate the value that British agriculture does have within the economy. And some of the figures Jack mentioned suggested that. And he mentioned the figures for employment, but that's 13% of the employment value on market, which is huge to lose that.
Just to unpack that a bit more, 13% of all people that are employed in the UK have their job as a basis of the food production that comes from agriculture. Is that what we're saying?
It won't be so just up, but all those supporting industries.
Yeah,
there's a lot more than just agriculture. But what we as farmers think is agriculture, but then there's all those supplementary businesses that we rely on and they rely on us. Right. But 13% is massive.
Yeah,
it's a huge number. But for me, back to your question about the headlines, collaboration is a word that goes throughout, and I think it's really important. We all think of the farmers and our advisors, etc., but the public must be part of that collaboration if this is going to work. Workforce, better place to work within agriculture. I would suggest that my generation, and I'm giving away a few clues here, we wear our badges of working 80 hours a week, like some sort of badge of pride. And I do think we need to get away from that. We can't expect the next generation to be doing that number of hours. Another surprising point, I guess, for me a little bit, is exports up by 30%, but we're only 65% self-sufficient for food. So for me, why are we not increasing our own self-sufficiency first, especially given the world as it is now? It's a very fast changing place. And within that, it became, she also mentioned clearer labeling, which is absolutely vital. We all know that. And for me, I'm just a little bit concerned, a bit cynical perhaps, but a bit concerned that agriculture cannot be used as a sacrificial lamb in trade deals moving forward. We've got the highest quality, we know that. We have the highest welfare, and that's got to be better for the environment and the consumer. But we must stop pushing this everything for cheaper food at all costs. It's just not it.
Yeah.
The one-stop shop, sorry, I'm going on a bit. The one-stop shop reference, great idea, not see how that will work. But Minette said herself, this is a heavy and complicated read, and she's not wrong.
Yeah.
But I do think some of this is the sort of thing, if it's spoken about, it becomes, you can make more sense of it than trying to read it black and white, especially as farmers. And I just think for a lot of this to work, it's going to have to start around the kitchen table with farmers talking and listening to people like Jack and Minette, their advisors, of how they visualize it all working.
That's really helpful, Wendy. Thank you so much for giving us some of your highlights. I think just on the point about it being a heavy document, it's certainly a fairly chunky document, but actually, I'm sure you'll both agree, it's nicely laid out, and actually the recommendations are well highlighted. You don't have to read every single word in there.
Absolutely.
It can be quite a quick glance through. So I would recommend that people go on to, I believe it's the DEFRA website, and just search for Baroness Batter's Farming Profitability Review to find this, if you want to know a little bit more about what we're talking. Jack, I'm going to come to you. I'm really interested in what Wendy said about this potential oxymoron of pushing our export market, but maybe not having that self-sufficiency with food, and maybe understanding that a little bit more. But was there anything else that surprised you?
Yeah, I think Wendy highlights it really, really well, especially around self-sufficiency. And I think for me, that always comes back to the consumer. What does the consumer want? And looking at ease and being able to go home, going to the shops on the way home, and purchase items. I think for me, the headline being an agribusiness consultant is about numbers, and in particular profitability and looking at long-term investment and succession, being key issues at the moment. I suppose the headline for me from the report is the real issue isn't efficiency, it's volatility within the supply chain. One of the clearest messages in the review that is farming profitability, the problem cannot simply be pinned on poor management or lack of efficiency. The evidence shows that well-run farms are repeatedly knocked off course by factors entirely outside of their control, whether that's commodity markets, SFI, weather being the one which is often the extreme.
So we're recording this a week after Storm Goretti came through Cornwall, and I don't know about you, Wendy, but I would say about a third to a half of the last week for me has been dealing with the impacts of that, whether it being practically and physically picking things up or just being on the phone talking to people. So, Jack, that's definitely an issue. Sorry, do go on.
And I suppose from my perspective, being a consultant, this absolutely resonates when you look at doing cash flow budgets, P&Ls, etc. We work with businesses that can benchmark, which can control inputs tightly and plan ahead. Yet, looking over the years, they still struggle to generate consistent returns from food production alone. And I think the review underlines how fragile success can be. Only 8% of the farms are made in the top performance band over a 5-year period. So I think the lesson is relatively simple from the review. You can optimize a farm business, but you cannot optimize away structural uncertainty.
Yeah. So I asked you what surprised you, and I think probably some of the numbers surprised you, but actually it feels like what we're left with there is a real challenge. So I guess I want to get on to causes for optimism. What can we look forward to? We talked a little bit about the different ways that Minette Batters said agriculture could proceed, those 3 ways. How long do you think it's going to take to turn the situation around, Jack? And what is it that's going to actually make that happen? So you talked about needing to be able to plan, but we've got this unknown of markets and weather and things like that. So what needs to happen, and when's that going to happen?
So in terms of what farmers can do now to really position themselves to make the most out of this report, I think being that I'm an agribusiness consultant, the first thing is understanding your numbers, understanding cost of production, your break-even figures, and just having a really good feel as to how your business financially performs. Moving on from that, it's looking at benchmarking. How do you perform with other businesses? It's always a little bit of a tough task because it's dependent on the data you're comparing to, but hopefully provides elements or highlights elements of the business which you can look into and making changes. The second is Wendy briefly touched on it, is collaboration. So actually engaging with local farm clusters. If you're in a national landscape, engaging with the likes of Farming and Protected Landscape, and also engaging with the series of events and farm talks which are ran by the likes of Cornish Mutual, the water companies, AHDB, etc. But for me, I think the key thing is attitude and being open to have a conversation and actually getting around a kitchen table with the people within the business, whether that be your daughters, your sons, your father, your mother, your consultant, your bank manager, and really just having an open attitude to consider adapting to these changes. Because if you don't, my fear is that you will be left behind with the volatile agricultural sector as it is at the moment.
Wendy, what are your thoughts on what we've heard there from Jack? Some really interesting stuff, and particularly talking about the attitude that farmers need for the future.
Well, exactly that. And much of what he said and notes very similar to what I've said as well, because there's a risk if we're not careful. Agriculture is such a vast industry. We're the same business, same industry, but every business is different and coming from a different place, whether you're rented, fifth generation as we are, startup farmers, tenants, etc. So, and even within our farms, every field is managed differently. So trying to get us all to have a holistic approach is going to be tricky. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity, isn't it, really? If we don't take notice now, when the governments have given us an opportunity, and Minette, bless her, 18 months of her life given to this, and it must have been so stressful. And I would say, I don't want to be the one to look at my son and grandson in the eye and say, you know what? There was a lady that gave up 18 months of her life to suggest how we can provide a future for agriculture. And I was too busy to read it. And I was too busy doing the work to actually sit down with fellow farmers, advisors such as Jack, NFU, CFA, all of those that are out there to see what we could do to protect our business for you and your children moving forward. So it's tricky, isn't it? Because we're all busy and we all think what we're doing is great, but we can learn from each other. And I think there has to be a deeper trust within ourselves and for those other bodies advising us, because they're coming from the right place. I think we've just got to try and do the best we can while staying true to ourselves and our farm businesses and the history of our farms.
Gosh, Wendy, that's just so brilliant to hear. There's so much in there that I want to unpack. I think I'll probably start at the end. You talked there about the history of our farms. That's something which I feel quite strongly that we need to make sure that we remember. So this is something which helps set our context. It helps us to understand that when new people come into our business, this is something that we rest on. This is our foundation stone. But actually, we do need to be looking forward. We do need to be collaborating, working together, taking this opportunity that we have with the 25-year roadmap that's going to be coming out, and with this review which has already been put out. We just need to make sure that our mindset, our attitude, as Jack's spoken about, is open enough to consider the opportunities for change. So we talked a bit about collaboration there, and there's a lot in the report, Wendy, and particularly between farmers and government, as well as bodies like the Agricultural Horticultural Development Board, AHDB, the Training Institute, TIAH or TIA, and the UK Agri-Tech Centre. How can we make sure that this collaboration actually happens and gives us meaningful outcomes, Wendy?
It's the consistency, it's us listening to each other, it's involving all those that we need to collaborate. Don't leave somebody out to the side. So I do feel strongly that we need the public on board. We're really fortunate, I get that we've got a campsite, so we get a lot of the public visiting us. And whilst it's great, it also shows us just how little they understand, but also how much they really do want to, and what they see on social media and misinformation in the press. That has got to stop. So somehow we have to stop that to at least get on a springboard that we can start getting everybody involved. Because I think if we've got confidence that the public are behind us, farmers will do and move mountains. But at the moment, those that are on their own, they go down a rabbit hole of a social media trail and there's no getting out. But the public are behind us. We really do need to believe that. We see it firsthand. Our son hosts a lot of school visits. A lot of the visitors come and walk around the farm, and they truly are invested and keen on what we do. But everybody that's got a public footpath can do their bit to educate the public. And once you've got that confidence, oh my gosh, it just gives you that confidence to then try new things, explain. You're not hiding behind your garden gate. And then you'll collaborate, you'll talk to all the advisors. And there's just such a movement to improve, continue improving what we do. We all strive to do the best that we can, given what we've got. And there's always that opportunity to do more, and let's celebrate and let's allow other people to celebrate what we're doing as an agricultural industry.
You're absolutely right there. Wendy, some really fantastic points. So this is an opportunity for generational change. And with people behind, I think you said with people behind us, farmers will move mountains. What a great image that is. We've been really fortunate on the Farming Focus podcast to have people talking about how farmers can engage and interact with members of the public. And that doesn't just necessarily have to be shouting about something you're doing on your farm. It can be just coming alongside the community and supporting them. We had Kendra Hall and Anna Jones in in series 1 of Farming Focus talking about that very thing, and I'd recommend going back to listen to that episode. It's an episode which I often think about. We also had Tom Martin from Farmer Time more recently, I think that was series 5, come on and talk to us about that then. So do go back and listen to previous episodes of Farming Focus to hear more about that. Jack, I'm going to come to you next. The report calls for better market monitoring systems so that we can plan as sectors, but also as individual businesses. And Wendy's already said every business is different despite being in the same sector. How do you think this looks and feels in practice, and how difficult will it be to put this in place?
To answer the second part of the question, how difficult will it be to put in place from end to end, from farm to fork? I think very. But I think there are some very small wins through collaboration and also with the development of technology. And I think it's a big, big opportunity. I think the challenge is coordination, not capability. Most of the data already exists, whether that be through inputs, whether that's feed or fertilizer, going through to markets and then through the supply chain and ultimately to the supermarkets. The data exists, but it sits in silos. So I think it's difficult to join it up, but there's definitely great scope. And then I think from the farmer side, the biggest hurdle is probably commitment, not complexity. So looking at why are we sharing our data? Why does the supply chain want all of our data? So I think it's a pretty big mountain to climb, but I definitely think it needs to be done. And I think it's already being done, in honesty.
Okie dokie. Yeah, we did hear a little bit about this in an episode from Series 5 where we looked at agri-tech and the use of farm data. So another one to go back and check on there. I'm conscious of time. We need to keep things moving. There's a lot to cover in this report, but I'm really interested in this piece. We touched earlier on exports, and there is a need for food self-sufficiency. But actually, the report talks about strengthening brand Britain and creating opportunities abroad. It also talks in recommendation 24 about establishing Food and Drink England for closer relations between farmers, local markets, government markets and things like that. What do we think the opportunities are here, Wendy, for farms to benefit from selling more of their produce, whether it's overseas or more locally?
Well, that's the way it's got to go, isn't it? If we're going to survive, we have to be able to sell more of our own produce, whatever it is. And it's not, we're a beef farm now, but there's all the horticulture. Agriculture is so vast, but we do need to all buy into, if there's going to be a Food and Drink England or a Brand Britain, as producers, I do feel we need to buy into that. We need to be inclusive and we need to be meeting the standards and not, I can't be bothered, there's not any benefit to it, or I don't get an extra pound per animal or whatever it might be. If I'm in this, we'll use Red Tractor as an example, we're within it, and I know the milk boys have got so much legislation and supply qualities and regulations that they have to meet. And actually, I don't see what's wrong with that. It helps animal welfare. A lot of it then helps the way we work. We talk about profitability, etc., but we have to be resilient, and it's not just business resilience. We have to be physically resilient and we have to be mentally resilient to be able to continue farming. We need to champion English food. We need to be championing it, the resources to our industry, local governments. We need to be going for quality. We've got to get away from this cheap food for all narrative that everybody expects, because you can't have the top quality, highest welfare, and looking after the environment cheaply. Those that are producing also need to have a quality of life and living. And I do think then that will show abroad as well. Other countries, I can't imagine, we can see how strongly other farmers abroad feel about their government's policies. We're not the only country that are struggling. And we have other farmers from abroad here staying, and exactly the same conversations. I just think it's really tricky because until we can get all the farmers on board and all the producers on board pushing this same narrative, it's got to be coming from the same direction.
So We're not alone. There are headwinds. We've heard this in a number of episodes of Farming Focus recently, but actually we have to all get on board. We have to commit. We have to buy into this direction of travel. That strength in togetherness is something which is coming through loud and clear from your answers, Wendy. Thank you for that. Wendy, before I come back to you to ask your causes for hope and optimism from the report, I'm going to ask Jack what his key takeaways were from Baroness Batter's report. So, Jack, your thoughts, please.
So I suppose my 4 key takeaways, and of course there's a lot to condense down from 155 pages. My first point would be embed food and farming in the national STEM curriculum. Everything from food, nature, environment, all the way through to health. I think it is absolutely fundamental that consumers at a grassroots level understand what goes into producing nutrient-dense food. My second key takeaway point, and this is often something I use in pretty much every farm meeting, is margin, not yield, smarter, not harder. From a farm focus on financial profitability as opposed to yield. And I think that's really echoed in the Baroness Batter's review. The third point is collaboration is not optional. There needs to be meaningful partnerships between farmers, government, and the delivery bodies. And it must be in a practical, accountable, and focused way, which really focuses on outcome and not process. And my final point, I think the most important for everyone listening, especially the farmers, it is a really dynamic, exciting time at the moment, and there will be opportunities. I think it's important we focus on the solutions as opposed to just having our hand out asking for money to solve the foundational issues. And I think really, challenge, change, opportunity, and really focusing on the third one, which is opportunity.
Wow. Challenge, change, opportunity. It's something that I've heard again and again over the last few weeks when speaking to friends about where they see the sector that they're in and the industry more broadly at the moment. We are going through a massive time of change, but change means there will be gaps, there will be space in our industry, and that means there will be opportunities. So you're absolutely right, I think, Jack, that people need to be ready to jump on those. So, Wendy, the final thought is for you. What are your causes for hope and optimism in agriculture at the beginning of 2026 with Baroness Batter's report as the foundation?
Well, I think the fact that we were given the opportunity, or Minette was given the opportunity to present the report in itself proves that there is a willingness on the whole to support the industry. I think we have to be optimists. We've got a son who's home farming, and we kind of owe it to them. And there is room for optimism. Every generation has had its ups and downs. We've had milk quotas, we lived through that and survived, and it goes on and on. So I really do think that moving forward, we can look forward to a competitive industry that's got great products, again, across the board, and a confidence to plan. And that's what we need, just the confidence to plan. A workforce that hopefully will enjoy what they do, and a countryside that's thriving with communities that are then benefiting across the board. And I think once we see all that happening, we'll start enjoying and loving what we do again. I think a majority do, but there's an awful lot which really, they can't see the wood for the trees at the moment. And I think it's really important as well, and I don't want to put a damper on anything, but as an industry that we do need to support each other. And I think we have to recognise that some just do not have the resilience for another battle. We must encourage the youngsters because they're innovative. They've got great ideas. We have to allow them to do that. Don't keep harking back. Use all the technology that is out there now, because it is invaluable, it's vast, and we have to support and allow that next generation to have their voice and use it and support them doing that.
Wonderful. There's some great thoughts there. It's about having a competitive industry with great products, making sure that we've got the confidence to plan. That in turn will support the communities that we're a part of, and we need to make sure that we're giving space to the next generation and embracing technology for the future. Thank you both so much for being a part of this episode.
Cornish Mutual, farming insurance experts.
It's time for this week's Showstoppers, and what a conversation to try and distill into just a handful of points. Wendy told us that this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for our industry, that we don't want to have to look our children, our grandchildren in the face and say that we didn't take the opportunity. Collaboration is not an option. It's absolutely essential, and it means that all stakeholders need to be taking part, pulling in the same direction and bought in. Those inside the industry, but also those outside, those people that represent our consumers, those people that are buying our products and putting them on the shelves of their own supermarket. So we need to make sure that we're all pulling in the same direction. Wendy also talked about challenge, change and opportunities, and Jack agreed that there will be opportunities as things change, as things evolve. There will probably be some consolidation in the industry, but that does give opportunities elsewhere. So we need to be alive to these, and we need to make sure that our attitude, as Jack spoke about, is ready to take these opportunities. A couple of ways of doing that we heard about in today's podcast. So number one, we need to make sure that we are ready to embrace technology, to do things differently. But also we heard that Wendy encouraged us to give space to the next generation, to give them a seat at the table, to listen to what they have to say and to take that on board.
Cornish Mutual, farming insurance experts.
Well, that's it for today's episode. A huge thank you to my guests today, Wendy Nicholas and Jack Pearce. Join us next week for a bonus episode when we'll be looking at what the recommendations actually mean at farm level. We would love to hear from you with any feedback you have about the podcast or questions or suggestions. So send us an email to podcast@cornishmutual.co.uk. Check out the show notes for more information on today's episode, including the link to our podcast disclaimer. You've been listening to Farming Focus, brought to you by Cornish Mutual. I've been Peter Green, and until next time, it's goodbye from me and everyone in the Cornish Mutual podcast team.
Cornish Mutual, farming insurance experts.